Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the first edition of Terror Tuesday. Ooh. If you are new here, this is not my normal content. This is a special for Halloween and the spooky season, and yeah, I'm getting a little bit of a jump start. So, I'm a horror buff. I have been into horror since I was a little girl, watching old horror movies, mostly the Hammer films with my Uncle Johnny, from when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And yeah, I was terrified. I used to go to sleep and I would keep the covers over my head. I would keep my hair around my neck in case Dracula wanted to come in the room and bite me. I mean, I could tell you, and I will tell you with some of these films, how I've lost sleep and how I've had really awful nightmares after watching some of these films and after reading some of the books that I'll be going over in another video. But today, I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 essential horror movies and a couple of honorable mentions. I'm going to find out where these movies are available to watch, and I will link them in the description box below. So hopefully you'll get a jump start on spooky season and you can watch these if you've never seen them before. And some of these might not be new to you, but I'm going to just throw this out there and suggest that maybe you give some of these a second watch and maybe give it a more analytical eye when you watch for a second time and look for some of the points beyond what's in the plot. All right, so I'm going to go in no particular order, starting with Rosemary's Baby. I first watched Rosemary's Baby as an afternoon movie that was shown in 2 parts. Came on 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'd run for maybe a little over an hour, hour and a half. So you'd see part 1, and then the following day there would be part 2. The first time I watched Rosemary's Baby, I was absolutely terrified. I went to sleep. I was afraid to have dreams. I was afraid that I was going to dream some of the things that Rosemary dreamt in the movie. But for those of you who don't know, Rosemary's Baby was directed by Roman Polanski and based on a book by Ira Levin. Ira Levin had a really short but prolific career in the kind of content that he produced, because he's delivered a lot of very iconic titles like The Stepford Wives, Rosemary's Baby, The Boys from Brazil. If you've never heard of Ira Levin, I really encourage you to look him up and to go through his catalog, because he's really amazing. What Rosemary's Baby is about, if you've never seen it, a couple moves into the Bramford building, which is actually the Dakota apartment building in the movie. That's where they filmed the exteriors. And the husband is an aspiring actor, and he's done some things, but he's never really been extremely successful. And his young wife, who is basically a stay-at-home wife, she wants to have a child eventually, and they're trying to get themselves on their feet, and they become friendly with the couple that lives next door. And I'm just going to leave it at that and let you watch the film on yourself if you haven't already. Also, there is a prequel movie that's coming out on September 27th based on one of the characters that's in the original. But with Rosemary's Baby, the real horror comes in the fact that Rosemary doesn't really have any control over herself, over her body, over her unborn child, and she sees a lot of things that are happening. She experiences a lot of things happening that she can't explain. She's encouraged by the doctors not to read, not to get any information. Her husband tells her, don't talk to anyone, and really puts this couple ahead of Rosemary, and you're just kind of along for the ride. There's no gore. There's only 1 or 2 visuals that are frightening. It's just something that relies totally on atmosphere, on what we don't know, and we go through this plot through the eyes of Rosemary and learn things when she does, which makes it really, really terrifying. So that's where I'm starting off. Next film, of course, The Exorcist. And I know that it's kind of a cliche, but The Exorcist, when I first watched it, it came on TV. This is like a theme. And it came on, I think, as an evening movie. And I got up to about the part where Regan urinates on the floor when her mom has the party, and maybe a little while afterwards while they're doing medical tests, and when she first starts to show signs of possession. I literally watched the 700 Club all night for probably about a week because I was so afraid that something like that could happen to me. And that's kind of where the fear element of The Exorcist comes in. Whether or not you're a religious person, and I would consider myself a spiritual person without really being committed to any particular religion. I was raised Catholic, and I think that that's why I'm drawn to a lot of these religious movies, because it kind of plays on a lot of fears that the Catholic Church put out from when I was a little girl. What would happen to you if you committed a sin? What would happen if you displeased God in any way, if you didn't follow Jesus in any way? And some of what the teachings are really are kind of ambiguous because they make a lot of things out to be very sinful. And they try to use that element of fear to keep you on the path instead of letting you be able to choose your own way. And that can be really not a good thing, because you should never follow or do anything because you're afraid of what the consequences are. You should do it from your heart. And I do things from my heart now. I believe what I believe, and I do it without fear. But at the time when I was a little girl and I was watching this, it really just absolutely got to me. And what makes The Exorcist so terrifying is that there was nothing that would have precluded this family from being victimized. She was victimized for being a young, innocent girl. And yes, she did play with a Ouija board in the beginning, but the whole concept that evil can be lurking around the corner, that evil can just get you and grab you and use you to some kind of an end. You know, I understood it at the time. I understand it now. And it's just really a horrible, horrible concept. So watch it. There's also a lot of things that are brought up about guilt, about not spending enough time with your loved ones, about how those kind of things make you weak and make you susceptible to certain things that are in the universe. And also related to Father Merrin, he's someone who's questioned his faith, and you know, as well as been in situations where he's experienced evil before. And this is just another challenge. But the good thing is that, as with most stories, thankfully, good does prevail. So try to give it a watch if you've been afraid before, because there's definitely more to it other than the demonic element. It's really, it does help you to look inside yourself at what you believe and how you are going to react in a situation that provokes fear. Next up is Night of the Living Dead. This was George Romero's first film. It was really kind of groundbreaking in the 60s because there were some special effects that hadn't been used, you know, makeup effects. It was done on a very, very tiny little budget. And this was at a time where Vietnam War was just starting. There was a lot of chaos in the world, and the idea of these zombies being unleashed and the world kind of coming to an end with this kind of a situation is, you know, horrifying today, but it was especially horrifying in the 60s. Another thing that I really want to bring out is the protagonist in this film is a black man. And thank God this is one of the first times where you see an African-American in a key role who's the hero of the film. And unfortunately at the time, it was something that was groundbreaking because you didn't often see that in older movies. And I think that it opened the doors for a lot of things to come. This was in the mid-60s. It really showed how people can survive and what they'll do in a situation where they really need to protect each other. If you're a fan of Night of the Living Dead, or excuse me, The Walking Dead, you need to see Night of the Living Dead and all the films that follow it for sure, because this is the OG. Next up is The Wicker Man. The Wicker Man is the OG folk horror. It stars Christopher Lee. It is an amazing movie that starts off kind of like a little bit of a slow burn, where you have a police detective going to this remote island to find a missing girl, and the locals, he finds out, are pagans. And when I say pagans, they follow Wicca. However, they don't follow Wicca in the traditional way because of what happens in the end. So there is a little bit of, I don't know, I guess sort of fudging in places where, you know, it's leaning towards doing things that they don't consider to be evil, but certainly are. But it's a very, very interesting movie. There's a lot of elements of humor. There's music. It's just something that you have to watch if you're into folk horror. This is kind of one of the movies that started off the folk horror craze. And speaking of folk horror, I want to just mention her Midsommar, which is definitely on the same vein as The Wicker Man. And that's terrifying because, like The Wicker Man, almost everything happens in the daytime. So, you know, it just preys on those fears that we're not always safe. Daylight, nighttime, there could always be something that comes around and lurks no matter where you are and no matter when it is. My next movie is The Shining. The original Shining with Jack Nicholson, directed by Stanley Kubrick. It is just an art masterpiece and a horror masterpiece. There's so much to unpack in the way Romero presented the story, presented the characters. I'm not going to get into it. There are many, many film analyses on The Shining. I'm going to put some in the description box that I think you need to watch if you have seen The Shining before and want to know more, because I can't possibly add any more to those films than what's already been said. At least I don't think so, and certainly not in this video. But besides an amazing performance by Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, rest her soul, it's just really an exercise in how camera angles and sets and pacing of a film can really add to the element of horror. And then beyond that, what makes the story for me so incredible is you really don't know for a long time whether some of this is imagined or if some of this is real. And then you have the backstory of Jack Torrance and his history of abuse and alcoholism, and how that plays into what happens in the film. So go ahead and give it a watch. My next film is one of my favorites, and it is Let the Right One In, based on a book by John Ajvide Lindquist, who's one of my favorite authors. Let the Right One In is a modern vampire story. It's set in Stockholm, actually kind of one of the outlying parts of Stockholm. And it's set in the 1980s. Lindquist really is a great Gen Xer. He does a lot of things that are set in the 80s. And you have a very lonely boy named Oscar, and Oscar is bullied in school. His parents just were divorced, and he finds a friend in Ellie, the child who moves into his apartment building, who we later find out is not a child. It's done in a very, very interesting way because you get hooked into the story by the friendship that these two children develop and what you have to do to survive. Oscar to survive his bullying, and Ellie to survive continually. I'm not going to say any more. It's an excellent, excellent movie. Please do not watch the inferior American remake called Let Me In. If you've seen that and you haven't seen the original, you need to watch the original because the remake is just god-awful. So I'm not going to say any more. It's an essential film if you're into vampires. Is it really scary? No, it's not something that you're going to want to sleep with the lights on after watching it. But it's a great film. There's a little bit of gore. It's more touching in some ways because of these characters. Lindquist has been called the Swedish Stephen King, and he certainly is, because he's able to write a lot of characters that you feel that you know that are good people in bad situations, and he just puts a lot of heart into his stories. So go ahead, head over and give it a watch. Next is Hereditary. Hereditary really shook me. I think, again, you have a movie that really focuses on a family drama, a family dynamic, things that you don't know about your relatives, and people that are involved in a cult who just kind of can't escape, and there's things happening and have happened to them that have left them in this situation, and it's been generational. Go over and watch it. There's really very little gore, but it's truly terrifying. It's the kind of movie that you need to watch a couple of times in order to unpack everything that's there. And pretty much everything on this list, I feel, is as well. My next film, which really isn't a horror film, it's my favorite movie, but it's usually classified as horror, is The Silence of the Lambs. The acting, the directing, the characters, it's all just top-notch. Will it scare you? In some ways it'll scare you because, of course, it's based on things that could have happened, and the character of Hannibal Lecter is based on real-life serial killers. Is it worth watching? Yes. It's probably one of the greatest films that's been produced in the last 50 years, let's say. If you haven't seen it, go over and watch it. It will kind of give you a lot more insight into, you know, why you need to be careful every day. And of course, it has the best female protagonist in many, many, many years, because she was able to do what other people just weren't. So that also contributes into this film being a great film. So that is my top 10. My honorable mentions, Get Out. Get Out is an amazing film, and a huge, huge shout out to Jordan Peele, who really teaches everyone that there's only a thread between a laugh and a scream. I think his films are incredible. Us, I would definitely recommend that as well. I have not seen Nope yet, only because I'm not really a sci-fi person, but he's fantastic, and I definitely have to watch it. Nightmare on Elm Street, again, it's definitely in the must-watch category, but it's not in my ultimate must-watch. And let's see. there's definitely a few more. Carnival of Souls, Freaks, Todd Browning. If you have not seen these, rush over. I'm going to link these in the description box. Let me know what you think. I will see you next Tuesday for more Terror Tuesday, and I'm going to be talking about my favorite horror authors. See you then. Bye. And if you're one of my handbag folks, I will see you again this week with some more really good stuff. Bye.